Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Lush Life No Labels, a podcast where I talk about the struggles and joys of self improvement, anywhere from relationships, career, wellness, and more. I'm Fatu. My story of the week this week is actually inspired by a walk I took recently. Anyone who listens to this podcast knows I love to walk and hike and all of that. And recently I took a morning walk around a park near my house while it was a little rainy. I mostly went because even though it was raining, the temperature was cooler at the time and I wanted to beat the heat that I knew was coming in later now that it's summertime. On this walk, I saw a rabbit sitting under a bush. I just stared at it for a little bit and then at one point it looked up at me and we stared at each other. And then the rabbit started grooming itself and cleaning its hands, which I thought was very cute. And y'all, I love rabbits. So I just stood there and watched this little creature. And it was a fabulous time for me. Fun fact actually, I was previously a babysitter for a rabbit. In college, a friend of mine had a dwarf bunny named Jake. And we were in college, so of course there would be different classes at different times. He and I had different schedules. And when I found out that he had this rabbit, I was so excited and volunteered to be a free babysitter. Like, you don't even need to pay me. I just want to spend time with this animal. So that's what I did. I would go pick up the rabbit, get the rabbit's pen and food and all of that, and go outside, set everything up, and just have the rabbit jumping around. And it was funny because in college, of course, college students are not seeing rabbits everywhere, or at least not pet rabbits at that time. So I would just be sitting there hanging out with this rabbit, and people would be walking by and asking, "Oh, is that a rabbit? Can I pet it?" And I would let them pet the rabbit. And it was just a nice sight to see. So that's a little bit about my background with bunnies and rabbits. And this was a dwarf bunny. So it was very, very small as well. So it's understandable. People didn't know what it was at first, especially when you're walking by. So, coming off of that and telling you about my little rabbit friend that I saw recently, I want to share a bit more about my love for animals and this big blue planet of ours. It has a lot of beauty, from coral reefs to mountain peaks. And I want to also reflect on some of the ways that the earth and the animals living on it have been evolving or also been affected by people. I have always loved nature and animals. Before I moved to America, I grew up seeing cows, goats, chickens walking around, and it was a common sight to see. I understood from a young age that animals are part of our world. I saw these animals every single day, and it was normal for me. I remember growing up here, I was a big fan of the Animal Planet channel on cable TV, for those of us who remember what cable is. Even now, I love the earth. I like to visit places like the American West where there are unique geological landscapes and animals. I like to see how these animals live and survive in such harsh climates. One time I was at the Grand Canyon and my friend and I saw a mountain goat just climbing up the side of the mountain. It was very, very steep too. And I was just so fascinated by its anatomy because, of course, it has to have some special toes to be able to grip on the side of a steep mountain. Another time, we literally walked into a moose. My friend saw it first. We were the only two on that trail. This was in Montana at Glacier National Park. Very, very beautiful place, by the way. And she sees it and gets quiet. And I'm just walking, walking, walking. And then I stop. And she's like, "There's a moose right there." Y'all, I was so scared because I do love animals, but we know that wild animals can be unpredictable. And a moose, that moose was, I'm only 5'2", but that moose was at least 7 or 8 feet tall. It was a female moose, and we knew that because she had no horns. She just looked at us. She was eating, but she was right in the middle of the path. So we were like, wait, do we stop? Do we wait? What if we go around her and she decides to attack? But she did not. She was peaceful. She was living her life. And in fact, we were the ones in her backyard. Even though there are some of those types of encounters, it's just really nice to see these animals and just see them living their lives unbothered. One of the things that I really do love about walking and also going to national parks is seeing the wildlife as well. It teaches me about life and how rich and diverse this planet is. I don't know what it is, but it just brings me joy. Even other things about the planet. The sunshine on my face on a nice summer day, laying on a blanket in a park and hearing the birds chirping. I do get nervous though when I hear the bees buzzing, not because they're doing anything wrong, but because I don't want to get stung. And even in the wintertime, even though I am not the biggest fan of winter, I love the first snowfall. The trees aren't vibrant, but I see it as a time before the regrowth when flowers start blooming again and the trees are lush in the springtime. Spring has so much life to me. And I remember in the past, I used to take walks around my neighborhood in the springtime and just see people's gardens and the flowers blooming. Animals are out of hibernation as well. So there's a lot of life. Even this past spring, I like seeing the ducks, their babies just walking around. It's a nice sight to see. And I know some people have pets as well, so they encounter animals on a daily basis. I don't really. I mostly encounter them when I'm out and about. But when I do take walks, I like to see people walking their pets and saying hi to the ones that I pass. And wild animals, like I said, like my little rabbit friend that I saw, other birds. Actually, speaking of birds, some of the birds around Massachusetts where I live, they do scare me though. I cross the street when I see them because they like to harass people. And one time when I was learning to drive, I came to a stop because there were a group of turkeys blocking the road. They were just standing there, and they are protected animals in my state. So, me and all of the people in the other cars at the intersection just had to wait for the crossing guard to try to get them to move. Also, if I see geese, I'm out because they like to tussle and chase people, and I'm not trying to do all that. Even though I have some of these annoyances or I guess fears with some of these animals, I recognize that these animals live here too. This is their home just as much as it's anyone else's. So, like I said, growing up, I used to watch the Animal Planet. I would watch nature documentaries. I even had the Blu ray DVD set for all 6 Planet Earth documentaries that were narrated by my fave, Sir David Attenborough, who is a British man. And I'm just going to talk about him for a second. So, David Attenborough is someone who has been a key figure in how I learned so much about animals and who continued to build on the things that he delivered to us in terms of nature and animals. I want to tell you more about him because, like I said, he has helped to shape a lot of people's interests in animals and the earth and has used his money to do that, which I think is a positive thing. Y'all, that man is 99 years old. He was born in 1926. Next year is going to be 2026. That is crazy. But it's amazing because he has been a naturalist since forever. I believe starting in the 1950s. He has written, produced, and narrated probably over, I don't even know, 20, 30, 40 different documentaries about the earth and its animals. So he's had over 70 years of experience doing this. He's had 40 animal and plant species named after him, a constellation, which I think is pretty cool. So most of his life, he's pretty much been a wildlife explorer, but he has also gone to remote places in the world and immersed himself in many cultures to really show the diversity of cultures around the world. And I learned this recently, but natural history documentaries as they are today were actually inspired by the way that he did things. He started using different cameras to really zoom in on things that are happening, like when a bee is pollinating a flower. Now we know what those things look like. It's really, really interesting. He didn't start off trying to be a conservationist, though, and someone who worked to maintain nature. He started off by just being someone who liked to observe the world around him. And then it grew into what it is today. He has received knighthood twice. I don't know if that's a record. I should probably look that up. But he's been knighted twice for his work on highlighting the natural world in TV shows and documentaries, and his campaigning to protect it. So I don't know how you can get knighted or what the requirements are, but if anyone deserves to be knighted, it's definitely Sir David Attenborough. Now, I've talked a lot about the earth and all the things that I like about it, including the seasons, the landscapes, and the animals. But I don't want to forget that everything is not just sunshine and rainbows. As people, we have a complex relationship with the natural world. We have domesticated animals like sheep, cows, and dogs. Actually, if you've ever wondered how we did that, I took a class in college about the way we built technology and the way that we started it. And that class started way back in the day when humans were still hunter gatherers. It essentially explains that as we learned more about as we learned more about farming and grain, of course, we ended up settling down instead of just moving from place to place. When we started settling down, we started accumulating more trash in the areas that we lived in. And for example, with the domestication of dogs, the wolves at the time, they would come around these human settlements and pick at the trash. They smelled it, they wanted to see what was going on, and the people started noticing. Once they started noticing, someone had the idea of, oh, maybe we can start leaving food out for them. So they start leaving food out for these animals. Then the animals start coming in and they start eating the food. Now they start expecting the humans to give them the food at a certain time or just every time they came around. So over time, with dogs specifically, we began to domesticate them because they became reliant on us giving them food and shelter, and they didn't have to go out and hunt for themselves. Just a little tidbit on that class. Maybe I'll do an episode on that class specifically because we also talked about, for example, during the Roman Empire, how they built those irrigation systems. A lot of it still stands today, which is really interesting in terms of technology and how we built into it. But it definitely is an interesting thing to see how we evolved from being hunter gatherers to having AI today. It's crazy. But back to this, I'm not saying that domestication of animals is a bad thing. That's just a thing that has happened, and that happened over thousands of years. I am talking about the fact that our relationship overall with animals and the planet is complicated. It's unfortunate that climate change and human intervention has diminished so many populations of animals. And of course, we know all the things about the planet. I'm not going to get into it too much here because, like I said, we all know climate change, or we should. But it does remind me that as people, we have a complicated relationship with the world that we are in. For example, I mentioned before that I like to travel to national parks, and those parks bring in millions of people around the world each year to see these world wonders. But it's important to also admit that there are conflicting missions with the National Park Service because, on one hand, they are there to provide access to these parks for people to come and visit and to pay to see. They are also there to preserve the natural sort of resources and cultural things that they manage. So it's like on one hand, they're supposed to preserve it, but then on the other hand, they're actually inviting people to go and see these places. And it's an interesting dichotomy because, of course, the money to keep up the preservations of these does come a lot from the tourism. So if you separate those out, then we may not have as much financial backing or people to maintain these beautiful parks. In other places on the earth, for example, trees and forests are being lost to development, coral reefs are bleached, glaciers are melting. These are things that we see in documentaries. For example, some of the ones that David Attenborough has had, and they're very real, right? We take trips to admire mountain ranges and oceans, but on the way there, we fill up our cars with gas, which leads to air pollution. So, a personal contradiction I think we all face, whether we're aware of it or not, is on one hand loving the land, but also we are consuming, in many cases, unsustainably. Now, I'm not trying to be alarmist about climate change. Like I said, the whole world is aware of this problem, and technology is advancing faster than ever before. So I don't think it's like the end of the world or anything. There is a ton of progress already being made, even if it doesn't seem like it. And I want to highlight some of those things because oftentimes when people talk about climate change, it's very much a doomsday type of thing, like, oh, it's going to be the end of the world tomorrow. No, it's not. The earth has gone through different cycles for millions of years, but I think we're just talking more and more about these things. So, what are some of the progress that are being made? For example, even in my state, Massachusetts, or in other big states like California. Oh, actually, fun fact, California has the fourth largest economy in the world, surpassing many countries. Okay. But in these types of states, they're already investing heavily into energy and sustainability efforts. There are also local grassroots efforts being done as well that we should not forget about because that really shows that everyday people, not just corporations or the government, are involved in these types of efforts. I'm confident that nature can and will recover because it's done it before. Another example of progress actually is California again and New York have passed laws saying you can't buy new gas powered cars starting in, I think it's 2030 or 2035. Now, people are still free to buy whatever type of car they want, whether it's gas powered or electric or hybrid. And even if no other state passes that law, imagine you're the CEO of Ford or Toyota. You know that if you make your new 2035 model with a gas engine, you'll lose 100% of your sales in two of the biggest states with the biggest economies in the US. Now, are you really going to take that chance and make your car with a gas engine knowing that that law exists? Of course not. So, it's reasonable to think that almost every new car in the next 10, 20 years will be electric or hybrid. Another thing, too, we're shifting to renewable energies like solar and wind in countries like India and China, which have the biggest populations on the planet. The current US government may not be a fan of those things and of the energy transition, but let's be real, it's going to happen. It's already here. It just might take the US as a whole some time to get with the program, but the rest of the world is doing it. So again, I don't know if people are seeing these things as much in this country, but in other countries and in many different states, there is a lot of progress and investment being made into these types of things. Another thing I read actually recently was last year a Swedish billionaire activist acquired 400,000 acres of Amazon rainforest. He paid billions of dollars to acquire it from a plywood exporter whose logging and sawmill operations were unregulated and unsustainable. Not to state the obvious, but trees are very important because, well, a little biology lesson, we breathe in oxygen and we breathe out carbon dioxide. Plants, like trees, they breathe or they take in, I should say, carbon dioxide and they put out oxygen, which we need to breathe. Right. So obviously, these are very important. And I think this is a great thing because, of course, a lot of these trees and forests are getting cut down to make way for developments and other human things. But this Swedish financier and industrialist has taken an unconventional approach to protecting the Amazon rainforest. He has leveraged his wealth and business acumen to preserve vast tracts of endangered land. He's also investing billions into other conservation projects. And he recognizes, though, that It's not the only solution, but it's at least somewhere to start from. And I think more of this is needed for sure. And it's a great example of how net worth income people can bring meaningful change too. Everything is not about corporations who are taking advantage. There are people out there who do care and who do have money as well, because we live in a world where money is the thing that really drives a lot of these projects. So we can't talk about this conversation without talking about money. Also, as someone who just finished a fellowship on the clean energy transition and am entrenched in it these days, I'm hopeful for the future because there are people who care. I mean, I'm just one person. I care if that matters. To me, it certainly matters. And I do know that there are other people that care as well. So I wasn't meaning to dive into climate change solutions or anything, but I'm glad that I at least got to talk about it on this episode a little bit because it directly connects with my love for animals and my love for this planet. I can't ignore very real science and economic happenings that we've all been exposed to via the news and our daily lives. So I'm glad I was at least able to share that with you. Now, going back to my story of the week and my rabbit friend that I saw on my walk, it reminded me to honor the earth's beauty when I can. I spend a lot of time outside. Well, not during the wintertime, but generally speaking. And even if you are not someone who particularly cares about the earth or animals, things like that, there are little things that you can do to not do any harm. For example, if you're outside and you're eating something, you could not throw your trash on the ground. If you're a smoker, you could not throw your cigarette butts on the ground. You could throw them in a trash or keep them in your bag until you get somewhere where there's a trash. That's just doing no harm, and it doesn't hurt anyone for you to throw your litter in a trash bin. I also just generally practice gratitude in my life, but also just for the planet. Because for me, loving nature isn't a trend. I see it more like a relationship. And as with all relationships, it takes care, not convenience. Sometimes it's not convenient. It takes care, not just what's convenient for us at that time. So I'll leave you with a quote. As the great Sir David Attenborough said, if children don't grow up knowing about nature and appreciating it, they will not understand it. And if they don't understand it, they won't protect it. And if they don't protect it, who will? So I'll wrap it up there for today, but I do have some questions for you. My first question is, what is your favorite animal? Mine is the lion. If you want to know why, leave the question in the comments and I will answer it in my next episode. My final question is, what natural space takes your breath away? Thanks for listening to another episode of Lush Life, No Labels. Like and subscribe on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. Cheers to your lush life and see you later.